All right, well, it is 6:05, so I figure it's just about time to get started. Welcome everyone to the final session of the 2021 LCF Convening. I know several of you have attended all 3 sessions. Maybe this is your first time, but regardless, I am so glad you were here. We have the lovely Dr. Marsha Goetting with us to present this evening, and I am beyond excited for that, and I hope you all are too. So before we get officially started, like always, I have to go through our little housekeeping slides. So I will pull that up and share my screen. So again, welcome. I'm so glad everybody could make it. A little housekeeping right off the gate. So please keep yourself muted unless speaking to reduce the background noise. Obviously, we've recorded and shared these videos so that people who couldn't make it can still benefit from the recording. So please keep yourself muted. There will be a Q&A section at the end, so feel free to unmute during that time. But if you happen to have questions that come up while you're listening and you just don't want to forget them, go ahead and type them into the chat box. We'll be monitoring that. So as questions arise, we can ask them on your behalf. And again, just enjoy, truly. So once again, I just wanted to list some upcoming events I have for Local Community Foundation webinars. We have a planned gift webinar on November 18th at 2 p.m. I hope people can make it because it's also our opportunity to introduce our new philanthropy officers, Heather O's and Jim Bennett, which I am so thrilled to have them as part of the MCF team. And I can't wait to share that webinar with you. And then we have one last webinar for the year, December 28th at 2 p.m., which I'm just going to be going over annual forms and why they matter for affiliates. So be sure to check out these upcoming events. So without further ado, I don't want to hold back any longer because I'm so excited. As our final keynote speaker of this 2021 session, I'm thrilled to present one of the most highly requested speakers in Montana, Dr. Marsha Goetting. Dr. Goetting is a professor and Extension Family Economics Specialist at the Montana State University in Bozeman. From 2016 to 2020, she presented over 220 financial and estate planning programs, reaching over 10,400 Montanans. She's received state, regional, and national awards for her programs. And that's part of the reason why we're so excited to have her here today. And then, of course, during the pandemic, she provided Mont Guide Mondays and Tuesday tip webinars with total registrations over 330 people. So lots of people have benefited from Dr. Goetting's work, and we are so lucky to have her here tonight to share with us her own take on estate planning specific for LCFs. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. Again, if you have questions that, that come up while you're listening, feel free to type those into the chat box and we will keep watching those. So without further ado, I will stop sharing and give it over to Marsha.
Do you see estate planning, legacy planning, or not?
We cannot see it yet, Marsha.
You cannot see it. Okay, I'm going to do this very calmly again. Share screen, click, find the screen, click, then hit share, click. Now, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
That's great. I can't.
We can see your Zoom.
Okay, we'll try one more step.
Technology is nobody's friend, but you got it. It's on now.
You would think by now I could get this figured out, but the university uses WebEx and it's one way there and Zoom another, but hey, we've got it for tonight. Well, I am delighted to be here this evening. I love the Montana Community Foundation. Have worked with different folks through the years, and I always find it very rewarding. And today, I wanted to just let people know if we don't get all the questions answered in the chat room, feel free to email me. You just use my name at montana.edu and I'll see if I can get those answers to you. Now, I can't give legal advice. Maggie is an attorney, right? Yes, and I'm not. So therefore, I will give you educational information so that Maggie won't report me and I wind up in jail somehow. Now, I looked at the list to see if Mary was going to be here tonight, and she's not. So I can tell you what she told me. She said, Marsha, what we're going to do here is get the attendees enthusiastic about estate planning. And I said, okay, I'll try to do that. And she said, get you guys motivated professionally and personally, because I'm going to give you some things tonight that I think will help you in your own situation. But I also want to present some ideas that you might be able to use with some of your foundation supporters. And then she said, and by the way, you're on the program at 6 o'clock, the dinner hour. Yeah. So don't be so dull that I put people to sleep while you're eating. Okay, so I said, yes, Mary, I will do as you say. And what I'll do is have participant engagement tools for our participants. And one of those happens to be polls. So what I've got is my assistant this evening, Christine, also known as Vanna. And Vanna is bringing up the very first poll. So you have an opportunity to tell me, when was the last time you reviewed your will? You know, is it you don't have one, past year, 2 to 5 years ago, 6 to 10, or more than 10 years ago? So feel free to use your little mouse and click, and we'll have a sense here of my audience, but also a poll, an engagement tool. So, wow, what do we got here? We've got 57% of you that don't have a will. That means you don't have an estate plan. That means you're going to let the state of Montana decide what's going to happen to your property. Now, come on, do you want them, the legislature, to decide, or do you want to do it yourself? And I bet you would rather do it yourself once I share some information with you. And then we do have someone that had looked at their will more than 10 years ago. Well, look at your situation. What has changed in the last 10 years? Has there been a birth, a marriage, a divorce? And that might be some indicators to you that you need to update your will or your estate plan. So I'm going to close that out. And what we're going to do is go on, maybe, and look at my second engagement tool. And that happens to be wildflowers. Now you're going to say, oh, brother, what is she doing with wildflowers? Well, what I want to do is use those as reminders. I want you to maybe remember a flower, and that will remind you about one of the concepts that I talked about. And my reason for doing this is several years ago, we're on our way driving to Kansas, and I'm whining in the car to my husband that, oh, I think my estate planning meetings have gotten really boring. And I wonder if there's any way that I could jazz them up. Well, he said, don't try to tell jokes because you don't tell jokes well. And he's right about that. But I thought wildflowers might work. For example, here we've got a pine drop. And you're going to say, oh, you didn't see. Yes, I did. I made Gary stop in the middle of the road and I get out with my camera because I said I could use that as a question mark. So that's the third engagement tool, is you have the chat room and you can ask questions there. And Vanna or Maggie or Teal will help me out by telling me what those are because I can't see them at all. Now, here's a really cute flower in my mind. See it? You know, you've got ears, you've got eyes. If you were to guess what the name of this flower is, enter it in the chat room, just for fun. Enter what you think this is in the chat room, and I'll help you out. I'll go, you ready? Moo, moo. Okay, any entries in the chat room? Did anybody say something?
Linda Clark said cow orchid.
Okay, well, you're very, very close because what it is called is a steer's head. And this is a flower that you see in Yellowstone, typically in graveled areas, And in the month of May, they come right up after the snow melts. So what that tells me is I want to steer you towards the potential consequences of using a joint tenancy as your only estate plan. We don't want to do that. I also want to steer you to understanding why dying without a will is not the way to go, and how to avoid the costs of probate by using some tools the legislature have given you. And I think these tools would also work for people to leave something to the community foundations. So we'll see what you think as we go along. Now, this particular flower is called a prickly poppy. And it's one that I found in Utah, but Eastern Montana folks tell me, oh, we grow them out here as well because it's been really dry. Well, this reminds me of property titles. You know, how you title your property can be a little bit prickly, or the result can be prickly. Now, when I was doing my out in the world public meetings, what I discovered is that joint tenancy with right of survivorship is the most popular way that people title their property. And I thought, I've got to really focus on this because people do need to know the consequences. And that's part of what I'll show you. So my very first tip for this evening from the prickly poppy is know how your real, your land, house, things like that, and your personal property, like your checking, savings account, certificates of deposit, whose name is on the title. And oh, look at this. There's 2 pink monkey flowers. And what that makes me think about are the people that tell me at their meetings, what they've done is put their checking or savings account. And usually this is my older audiences, but they've put it in the name of their child as well. And I say, well, okay, why are we doing that? Well, mom says, I want some help with paying the bills. It's just getting a little bit too much for me. So that's what we have here is Sarah has $80,000 in her checking account. And you might think that is a ridiculous amount. But let me tell you, the AARP research tells us older folks keep a lot more money in their checking account than you and I would. And my dad was one of those. I was just having fits because he had $80,000 in his checking account. And I thought, what if some weird person comes along and takes it away because he had macular degeneration and he couldn't see what he was signing. So anyway, this is what Sarah's done. She put it in joint tenancy with her daughter, Susan. Now, had I been there, I would have said, oh, Sarah, if you do that, what if Sarah divorces? You know, that money is going to be included in the split up in the divorce. What if Susan gets sued? All of a sudden, your $80,000 is subject to creditor claims. What if your daughter becomes addicted to drugs? You know, she'll go and withdraw that $80,000 in no time at all. And then what if the daughter is in debt and the creditors come after Sarah? But Sarah didn't ask my opinion, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't tell her what to do. But Sarah said, Marsha, calm down, calm down. She wrote a will. And in the will, she is dividing this property equally among her 3 daughters. So let's take a look at that. How is that $80,000 going to be divided? Kristen's going to bring that up and we're going to see, is it equally among the 3 daughters? Is it going to be all to Susan because of mom put her name on the title? And is it going to be Montana because we've got a conflict between joint tenancy and the will? Or you could say all of the above answers are wrong. So tell me in the chat, and it looks like we've got 12 participants tonight. So I would like to see 12 answers. And we're not even halfway there. So, oh, I've got one that says all the answers are wrong. I've got tie between 2 of them. Moving up. All right, let's see what we've got here. Actually, we do have a tie. Can you see that? We've got 43% that said all to Susan, and we had 43% that said all to Montana because of the joint tenancy conflict. Okay, let's take a look at that. The persons that said the daughter Susan is correct, okay, or are correct. So you see, mom wrote a will thinking she could undo a joint tenancy, and you can't do that. A joint tenancy is a contract, and the contract takes priority over the will. Okay, and it doesn't matter if the will was written earlier than the joint tenancy or later than the joint tenancy. Don't want to do that. So what could we do about a situation like this? Well, first of all, we'd be interested. Daughter Susan knows what mom would want to do with that money. She would want Susan to share it, don't you think? But of course, we have a question. Will Susan share? Well, you could put that in the chat room. Chat room. See what you think. Will Susan share? Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to move right along and just emphasize about Montana law is that you've got this joint tenancy with right of survivorship. It's going to take precedent over the will. And again, it doesn't matter if the will was written earlier or later. So what could we do? Well, Montana passed a really neat law. It's called the Montana Multiple Party Account Act. And it provides a form for our financial institutions that allows you to have someone on your checking account, but they have no ownership rights in the checking account, for example. So what that means is they can write the checks, they can pay the bills. So on the form, and we have an example of this form, and because it's statutory, I can provide it through a Mont Guide. If it wasn't statutory, I couldn't do that. So yay, that it's statutory. So what you would click or put an X on is multiple party account without right of survivorship. Then it goes on to say, at death of the party deceased, party's ownership passes as a part of the deceased part. Don't you just love that excuse me, Maggie, mumbo jumbo? That's legalese type stuff. But if you have a chance to look at this form before you go into your institution, you'll be great and know what you want to check. So with the will then, and her mom having that multiple party account act or form without survivorship, what that means is all three daughters then are going to share equally. So be cautious about putting property in joint tenancy just because other people at your coffee clatch group said, well, this is what I've done and it works just perfect. That individual may not be aware of the consequences that I've discussed.
Hey,
So
we
yeah.
do have one quick question.
Okay.
Alan Roberts from the Red Lodge Area Community Foundation asked, would this be applicable if the account is inside a trust?
Okay, if you have an account that is inside a trust, it is in the name of the trust. Okay, and it is the trust that's going to be determining what happens to the money that's in that account. The trust is very similar to a will in a way, but you can have a living trust while you're alive, but the trust is the owner. You can have a testamentary trust where you say the property goes into the trust upon your death, type of thing. That's testamentary. But then it's the trust document or the agreement that says this is what's going to happen to that particular asset. And I also think Sarah could also visit with Claire Mueller about leaving a bequest to her favorite nonprofit organization. And that happens to be the Sealy Lake Community Foundation. That could happen. So you need to decide whether joint tenancy with right of survivorship or a multiple party account without survivorship best meets your estate planning goals. And this could be very important in a family that has, for example, 3 daughters, and you've got one that's on the account, and then the other 2 are hurt because they didn't get included. But when mom explains, hey, she has no ownership rights to this account, it's still going to be split among you 3 daughters. They may be happier when they've heard that. Oh, looks like I'm going to use a monkey flower again. And the pink monkey flower now is going to look at joint tenancy and married couples. So let's see what happens there. What are the consequences of a young married couple putting property in joint tenancy? Now, I bet you've got kids or grandkids that have done this very thing. They get married, and to show their love for one another, they put that property in joint tenancy with right of survivorship. And so we know it's John and Mary. And sometimes you'll see JWROS. It gets, and there's a T in there somewhere, but it joint tenancy with right of survivorship. So I'm going to take my friends here, Tim and Sharon. And we'll say that Tim and Sharon do not have children. They don't have a will. After all, they're young. They're not going to die. Okay. Well, they're out there on Highway 93. You know, the one that says, I drive 93, pray for me. It's that road. So Tim dies first. Sharon dies 3 days later. Okay. We got a good poll question here for you. Who receives the property if Tim dies first and Sharon dies on the third day? Is it going to be Tim's parents, Sharon's parents, half and half, or all to the state of Montana because they do not have children? Wow. Am I glad I asked this question? Nobody got it right. We've got 67% that said Sharon's parents. And I'll bet the reason you said that was Sharon lasted the longest, so therefore it ended up going to her folks. And then we had 33% of you say it goes to the state of Montana. Wrong, wrong. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It's half and half. Yeah. Now, it doesn't matter who brought in what to the marriage, you know, and typically I use this example that Tim's parents gave them a farm upon their marriage. So now half of it goes to Tim folks and the other half goes to Sharon's folks. Oh, I'm sure Sharon's folks would give it back, don't you? People in my audiences don't think so. Anyway, that's what's going to happen. So I can convince young couples to write a will simply by using this one. And if I haven't convinced them with this example, I take it one step further. Oh, but I should tell you why it's half and half. Montana has a law that says if neither joint tenant survives the other by 124 hours or 120 hours, 5 days, it's split among their heirs. And you guys are smart, so you're thinking, but what if? What if Tim dies first and Sharon dies 6 days, 8, 9, or 10 days later? Now whose relatives receive the assets? Right. It's going to be Sharon's parents. And don't forget, it was Tim's folks that gifted him this farm. And now Sharon's parents have it. So I found with young couples, they can have as little as $1,000 and they have strong feelings about where they want that to go. So they need to get together and write that will. And of course, if Tim is the one that survives the longest, then it's his parents that receive all that property. So for planning purposes, do we want to just take a roulette here? No, because it could go to Tim's folks, it could go to Sharon's folks, it could be half and half, just depending on who survives beyond that 5 days. Okay, so Tim and Sharon could have written a will, and maybe they would have visited with Tracy Timmons about leaving their assets to the Red Lodge Community Foundation. It could have happened. So married couples need to be aware of the impact of this 120-hour survival requirement for their joint tenancy with right of survivorship property. And remember, Tim and Sharon are going to leave it to one another anyway because of the contract. And what the will needs to do is to go beyond the 5 days. The will can be written so that if there's simultaneous deaths, or if one doesn't survive the other by 8, 9, 10, whatever days you want, you can put that in the will. Now let's take a look at these pretty flowers. What do you think they are? Well, usually people say, I know, those are daisies. And no, they're not daisies. What they are white mule's ears. And I found this in the Big Sky area. And now there's a big house kerplopped on that area. So I'm glad I got those wildflowers and being white, because they also come in yellow. So have you heard this phrase, dad or mom is stubborn as a mule? See, this is the part where I hate not being able to really see the audience, because if I'm looking at the camera, I can't see you over here. And in my audience, I'd usually get a Twitter or so, you know, people who go, well, I'm moving along. What we want to do is look at dad. And we want to examine the consequences of whether dad is stubborn as a mule, as his kids thinks he is. So here we've got dad. And dad's wife died several years ago. And so he has all the property in his name only. Okay. And he has child A and child B. And I can say, you need a will? And he says, no, I don't. I go, why not? He says, you know, I'm going to divide it the same way the state would. Why pay an attorney? Sorry, Maggie. Why pay an attorney a lot of money just to do a will that's going to be exactly as the state would do it? Okay, so I'm sitting in my office and I get a phone call. And the phone call is child A. And child A is saying, hello, what we want is you to call our dad. And I go, what for? We want you to tell him about joint tenancy property. I said, I can't do that. I'm a state employee. I mean, bringing to one of my estate planning meetings in Billings, and of course, this was pre-COVID, and he'll hear about joint tenancy. Well, here's why they were really concerned. What if dad marries the wow wow floozy from Billings? Well, he could, and he did. Now, I don't know that she was a floozy, but we discover that he has kids, she has kids. But, you know, he's convinced that with this joint tenancy and his will, and here's where the will comes in, because he tells the kids, don't worry, I've written a will and you're going to get the ranch. Now, here's the situation. Of course, dad dies. Will dad's kids get the ranch? Now, everybody shout out yes or no. And I'm going to look at the screen and be able to tell what you said. Yes or no. Could have had a
I say
question.
no.
Say no.
Emily Fraser
Exactly.
says maybe. Oh, but no. Yeah.
Definitely no. And sometimes in a program, I'm going to ask questions twice to see, okay, did I convince people? But I figured you're all smart. You won't miss this one. You would have all said no, because right, it's joint tenancy with right of survivorship. So he dies, it all goes to her. Now, what's next? Well, let's say she dies. Okay, where's the property go? Her kids. You see, he has disinherited his children by putting the property in joint tenancy and not realizing that that section of the will won't apply, because the JTWORS is the joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Can't change the contract. Okay. Now we could get into another scenario and say, well, what if the surviving spouse marries the hunk in Missoula? Okay, so she didn't die, got a hunk. Okay, well, what we discover here is she died in a car accident in eastern Montana. And who received the property? You know, the husband up there, I call him Mr. Happy Camper, because he gets everything. Whoops, and the kids do not receive anything. So we've got to be aware of how we title property and the impact that that's going to have on our heirs in this case. Now, it could have been Dad the Mule could have visited with Linda Clark, and she's the board chair of the Sunburst Community Foundation. And that was one of the programs that I was going to give before COVID hit. You know, COVID hit, we shut down. I had 32 programs that I had to cancel in April, or the end of March, April, and May. And boy, was I sad, because I had worked really hard on those programs. But Sunburst was one of them. I'll get back there again sometime. So joint tenancy with right of survivorship may not be the best choice, particularly if you have children from a prior marriage. One of your estate planning goals probably would be you want to protect the children. You also want to protect your present spouse. And there's ways that you can do that. Now, you guys know this one. It's the bitterroot. Yeah, it's our Montana state flower. And it is so beautiful. And it looks, almost every flower looks different with a bitterroot. But what it reminds me of is the bitterness that can result from lack of planning. Because if you don't have a will, you don't have a trust, you don't do beneficiary designations, Montana interstate succession laws or statutes decide how your property is distributed. So let's look at the Bitterroot family. We've got this Bitterroot family start out as mom and dad years ago. They have children, and the children get married, and then they're blessed with grandchildren. So for a period of time, this family is so happy. Everybody's alive. Well, then things start happening. We've got a son that died as a result of a car crash or an airplane crash in Western Montana. We had a daughter that died as a result of a car accident. Then we had dad die as a result of a heart attack. So the individual that we have left is grandma, a son and in-laws, and the grandchildren. So I'm going to make this easy for you. I'm going to say what we want to do is look at grandchild D. I want you to pretend that you are the Montana legislature, and what fraction, if any, would you provide to grandchild D? So Kristen is going to bring up a poll, but you can be thinking, am I going to leave that grandchild nothing as a state legislator, 1/6, 1/8, or 1/9? Those are your choices. So tell me with your mouse clicker, what fraction, if any, does that grandchild receive? Okay, we've got some folks. Well, we've got some folks that I'm a little concerned about. I'm looking here and I am seeing that, let's see, we've got 5 and 4 is 9. We still have 16 participants, supposedly. Are you off cooking dinner? I want you to participate. Okay, so the poll is ended. And 45% of you are mean. You are not going to leave that grandchild anything. And we've got 18% that said 1/6, and then we had 36% that said 1/9. Well, what do we got then? The 1/9 people have it. Right. They're saying that grandchild is going to receive a 9. And here we have the turquoise child. And you guys are saying, wait a minute, why? Why would we have one grandchild receiving a 1/3 and the others only receiving 1/9? And oh my goodness, the pink grandchildren are the ones that don't receive anything. Well, it's a concept called right of representation. And the easiest way to explain it is to say, look and see how many children did mom and dad have? And they had 3, right? So that means their estate is going to be divided 3 ways. And even though we have one child, like the son over here with the turquoise child, he's deceased, but by right of representation, his child gets the third. And over here with the green, that's why it's 1/9. A third of a third is 1/9. And then how'd you like to be the two pink children? You know, you're asking your parents, well, didn't grandma like me? I mean, we only get nothing. And you can explain it's the law, but hey, they're kids. They don't understand what the law is doing. So kind of a sad situation there. Now, it could have been that child that receives a third is under age 18. Oh, geez. Well, a will wasn't written. So the child inherited more than $5,000. And as such, the state of Montana requires a conservator to be appointed. Now, who do you think would be the conservator? Well, I suspect most of you think it's going to be, you know, his mom. And it could be true, but maybe grandma and grandpa didn't like her. Who knows? She could be an addict of some sort, or maybe she's just the type that lets money slip through her hands. Well, grandma and grandpa could have left the asset into a trust for the grandchild, and they could have said the money is to be used for the health, education, maintenance, and support of that child. And that would keep mom's hands from getting onto that. So you can offer control, but first you have to decide what it is that you're wanting to accomplish, and that's your estate planning goals. Now, it could have been grandma had written a will and she decided she's going to leave all of her assets to her favorite nonprofit, which happens to be the Montana Community Foundation. Yay, grandma. So the tip from the Bitterroot family is, if you want right of representation to apply in your family, do you want that to happen in your case? And do you want to leave assets to your favorite charity or nonprofit? Now, I bet there's some of you that are sitting back saying, well, you know, this is really kind of boring because I already got a will. My question to you is, look in that will. Did the attorney write in that the property is going to be distributed by right of representation among your children? And was that explained? And do you understand it? I didn't get it just by reading. I just go, duh. And finally, I drew it out like I drew for you this evening. And then it was very obvious what was going to happen with property under right of representation. Now, here are larkspurs. And I actually had one lady at one of my meetings and said, Marsha, you shouldn't use that flower. Don't you know it's toxic? And I went, this is beautiful, because it reminds me of toxic family relationships. So let's look at a situation here. Let's discover how toxic relationships can develop. Here we have another family, mom and dad. In this case, they have 5 kids and they've got 6 grandchildren. But the person we're going to look at is, oops, the brother, bachelor brother. And he happened to pass away in 2020. So we're looking at that and seeing, well, he's got substantial assets. Who has priority to inherit all of those assets, which amount to about $2 billion? So answer in the chat room, who has priority to inherit his assets?
Linda Clark said his parents. I personally wrote mom and dad, potentially.
Okay, good. And Maggie, let's not give people's full names. We're just going to say their first name.
Perfect.
So they have anonymity or something like that. See, I can't even pronounce it, much less spell it. Okay, so here we go. We're going to find out. And you guys are right. Yeah, it's mom and dad. Mom and dad are going to go half and half. Now, if dad's the only survivor, he gets it all. Okay, we don't divide it differently. And then let's say, well, mom and dad are gone. And which group now has priority? Is it going to be brothers and sisters or nieces and nephews? And you can write that in the chat room too. Siblings or nieces and nephews?
Emily said siblings.
Siblings, okay. Anybody else?
Alan also said siblings.
Okay, looks like the siblings have it. You betcha. It's going to go 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. But that's not this family. Actually, what happened is we had a sister pass away in 2001, another sister pass away in 2005. So you see, I have a red lightning bolt on brother Green there. And I want to know what fraction, if any, does that brother receive? Okay, we got a poll or a question. Is that brother going to receive all, 1/2, 1/4, or nothing? Because he is single, no children, no spouse. Okay, get your bid in there. We've got all of 6. I hope you don't have broken hands. Of course, I realize some of you may be watching this or listening to this through your cell phone, and it's kind of hard to do the polls, isn't it? Yeah, I haven't figured it out yet. That's why I like to use my computer. All right, let's see what the answers are here, Kristen. Okay, half of you, well, no. 75% of you, 3/4 of you are saying a half. You know what this was? This was a question designed to see how good of a teacher I am. And I'm not very good because all of you would have got it right if I'd have taught you. So it's not your fault. We only had one person that got it right. Let me show you. 1/4. Now, I'm going to do this very calmly. Right of representation applies here as well. So what that means is how many brothers and sisters did our bachelor brother have? And he had 4, right? Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means the 2 brothers are going to receive 1/4. And then the one niece over here receives a 4th because that's what her mom would receive. And this is the niece that left Montana 20 years ago. She moved to New York City. She hasn't had anything to do with what she calls her Montana hick relatives. She's Miss Lottie Dottie. Okay, and then the other sister, one of the kids is in, you know where, because he was arrested and convicted of drug dealing. And we won't even talk about the other nephew because who knows, you might know the family. So again, I wished I could have sat down with this brother and shown him a drawing like this and say, you know, you have told me you have no respect for your nieces and nephews, but yet you die without a will. This is what's going to happen to your property. So you see, single people need to do some estate planning as well and get their property where they want it. And if they have nieces and nephews that are kind of what I would call losers, well, maybe they want to leave it to a community foundation. And I found there's the Community Foundation for a Better Big Fork. And I've been down there to give a program for them on that big stage they have. Oh my goodness, it's quite the thing. So that's what we've got with control and a will. So you need to decide, do you want your property to pass by right of representation and therefore avoid toxic family relationships? Okay, if I know what I'm doing now, we get to have a break. That means you've got 5 minutes to take care of the necessities. And we will gather back together in 5 minutes. So don't go away. There's more. Fluff your pillows. Okay, according to my fancy little timer, it's been 5 minutes. So I'd like to welcome everybody back and explain what I was crazily doing during that break. I keep a little set of weights to the side because it seems like I'm sitting and participating in webinars as well. And man, I got to tell you, sometimes they're boring. So I try to knit, or I try to do some weights or exercises just to work on that, keeping the noggin going. Okay, this flower. Yes, that is the real name of the flower. It's called Old Man of the Mountain, and you find it up in the gravelly mountains. And you know, the thing about estate planning is there's really the misperception it's only for old people. And you know, when I give my meetings, I've got to say there's probably more gray hairs or white hairs in the audience than the straight colors there. But youth need it too. And believe it or not, this is Youth on Age. That's the actual name of the flower. Found that one in Washington in the Cascades. And that reminds me about you thinking they're invincible. You know, they don't think they're going to die. Well, they do. You know, they can have accidents. We've got cancer. In Bozeman, we have rock climbers that fall. We have skydivers that the parachute doesn't open. And now we got to contend with COVID-19 or the Delta virus. So it can happen. So what we've done is put together a website that I'm really quite proud of. My assistant, Carrie, was able to put this together. And we call it an interactive website because you have a chance to answer questions yes or no. And you keep answering them. And what will eventually happen is we'll show you how your property is divided. So this is just an example of one of the screens. Do you have, if it starts out, are you married? Yes or no? Do you have one or more living children? You answer, then you answer again, and there may be several more questions. But when you're finished, then it will give a situation very similar to yours. In other words, instead of 4 kids, there might be 3 kids, but the concept is the same. And note that I have there, right of representation was used in this particular example because the person had a daughter who had died before you. And so it puts you in that situation. So it's kind of fun. We have 13 family situations as far as single. We also have 22 marital situations. And a matter of fact, we have his, hers, and ours as far as kids go and what's going to happen with the property. So if you want to do that, you go to our website, and it's very easy to find. You just do Dying Without a Will in Montana, and what you will get is either our Mont Guide, which is one of our fact sheets, or it will have the website. Now, some of our folks out there don't have really dependable internet service. And if you're in that situation, what we've done is put together a CD. And it has the same information as the web does, but it allows you to just be doing that when you want to do it. And maybe that's something the younger generation can show the older generation, because we know 7 out of 10 Montanans pass away without writing a will. So my tip from the Youth on Age and the Old Man of the Mountain is, if you don't have a will or trust, use our MSU Extension website and find out how the property is going to be divided among your heirs. Now, this particular flower, I thought it was so pretty, and it was in my early days of finding wildflowers. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in a card and I'm going to send it to my best friend's mom in Lima. Do you know what I sent to this mom who had cancer really, really bad? I sent her a mountain death canvas. Oh, I felt so bad. But bless her heart, Cherry's mom wrote me a note, and she said, you know, I know about the mountain death canvas because we had 7 sheep that they had lost up in the mountains. So she forgave me, and I've been mailing her cards ever since, but nicer ones, okay? So what a death canvas makes me think about are pods. And pods are payable on death designations. So you can have a POD at any of your accounts at your financial institution. You know, your banks, your credit unions, they will allow you to put a POD on your account. Even if you've had one there for the last 30 years, you can now go in and add a POD to that. So savings, checking, and also United States savings bonds. But there's a catch with the savings bonds. They only allow you to do one. Yeah, but the rest will allow you to do more than one. So at death, the whole idea is it doesn't have to go through probate because it automatically passes to your beneficiaries. All your beneficiary will need is an affidavit that you have died and a government issued photo ID. And the bank will write out, or the credit union, the amount that you are due out, or this is your beneficiary, what they should receive. And the other thing that you can do is POD to your favorite nonprofit. So one of mine is the Montana 4-H Foundation. That's a very good organization. I know because I grew up in 4-H, but also I've worked with the 4-H program here in Montana. So you can do, and think of this, you're a foundation board of directors, or you run one, and people usually want to leave it to their spouse and kids. And I just like to take them to that third step. But what if your spouse wasn't alive? What if your kids weren't alive? Would you want it to go to one of your favorite nonprofits? Yeah, why not? So you can use PODs to control the distribution of your checking, savings accounts and avoid those probate fees at death. Now we got another death canvas. Oh my goodness, that's the thing I found when I got started with wildflowers. There's not just one death canvas, there's two. And then how do you tell the difference when you're just starting out? It's really frustrating. But the metal one reminds me of TODs. Now, what's a TOD? That's a transfer on death registration. And some of you have already done this. It's not called a TOD. It's simply a beneficiary designation that your brokerage firm allows you to do. But now we have this TOD law. It's for stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And it's the same thing. So some of you have already done it, but those of you that haven't, you need to say, I want to put a TOD, transfer on death designation, or registration with my stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. It transfers to the beneficiary then without probate. And if there's one thing I found, Montanans love to avoid probate if they can. But what else could we do with those TODs? Well, we've got a lot of community foundations out there. We've got the Miles City, we've got Dawson County, Glendive, Whitefish, One Valley. There's no other name in that one. So, you may not know what that one is, but I think it has to do with the Bozeman area. So we've got a lot of foundations out there. So use those TODs to control the distribution, avoid those probate fees at death, and you can also lead to a local community foundation. Now, what I do when I'm doing a program like in Sunburst, I list the Sunburst on these kinds of things. If I'm in Glendive, I list the Glendive examples. It takes a little bit more time to put together, but I'd rather use examples from the community rather than saying, oh, the Bozeman Community Foundation. Not good PR, I don't think. So now that you know about PODs and TODs, will you place them on your financial accounts? Yes or no, or do you already have them? So Kristen has pulled it up and you can answer yes, no, or already have them. Oh, good. I am always glad. Oh, I did get a no. Here I was just gonna say I had no no's. Now I got to know, and I want to know why, but you're not going to tell me because you might be embarrassed. But email me later because I want to be educated on why I didn't convince you that you need to take advantage of one of these. Okay, moving right along. We're going to move right along. Oh, heart-leafed arnicas. Okay, you find those in the Deer Lodge National Forest and lots of places around western Montana. So we've got some heart-to-heart estate planning that's going on between Joe Hart and Brooke Hart. Okay, and Joe really has heartfelt intentions. He has a $100,000 CD, and he's designated Brooke, his sweetheart, as his POD beneficiary. Yay for her. But Joe later changes his heartfelt intention. And what does he do? He writes a will. And in his will, he says, I bequest my $100,000 CD to my son, Eric. Now, by now, you know what I'm going to do, don't you? I'm going to ask you who receives the $100,000. Is it going to be Brooke because she's the POD beneficiary? Or is it going to be Eric because he was written in the will and the will was written later? Let me emphasize, later than the POD thing was done. So I want to see what you say. If you see me looking a little disappointed, I am, because once again, I'm not a good teacher. Maggie, I don't know why you had me here. Okay, look at this. Now just look. Okay, in that doggone poll there. Okay, here we go. 73% of you have it right that it was Brooke. 27% of you said that it was Eric. No, why not Eric? Well, let me tell you. See, a POD is also a contract. I know I was kind of stretching it, hoping you'd get it, but the provision in the will is not honored. It's not validated because we've done a POD and the POD is a contract. So we need to be very careful about that so that we're not writing a will thinking we're taking care of things when we've already done something else. So be cautious about that. Tell mom, tell dad, tell your brothers and sisters about it. So what should Joe do? Well, if he wants Eric to receive it, he's got to go to his bank or his credit union, and he's got to fill out a new POD form. Very simple, not a problem. The bank, the credit union can do that for him, but that's what he's got to do. A will isn't going to take care of it. And maybe what he wanted to do was leave the property for that $100,000 to the community foundation of Northern Rosebud County. Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? Okay, now, me. What we're going to do here is a little song. And some of you are old enough to remember the days when we had a guy, and I think his name was Mitch, and he'd sing along with the song. So we're going to do that here. On your mark, get set. Okay. You can't undo a beneficiary designation with a will. See, I was never in choir, and you can you can see why. But I want you to remember that. I love it when somebody, I'm out in the Tulies and they come up and say, you can't undo a beneficiary with a will, or something along those lines. And we both laugh because I know that person really got the main point. So have a heart. Review your beneficiary designations on your checking and savings accounts, your certificates of deposit, your United States savings bonds, and don't forget about your life insurance policies. you need to make sure that all of those beneficiary designations are up to date with the goals that you have today. Now here we have an explorer's gentian. Oh, I really, really like this flower. It is one that you don't see till August, but you can see it in Glacier and many of our national forests. And it's called an explorer's gentian. So what I want to do is explore with you a new law we have in Montana called a transfer on death deed. Wow. Now, get this, we can have $6 million worth of property and we can transfer it with a transfer on death deed. And there is no probate. We just have to decide who we want to be our designated beneficiaries. No probate. This particular law became effective October 1st of 2019. Now, prior to that time, we did have something very similar. It was called beneficiary deeds. And if you already have a beneficiary deed, you don't need to change it just because they changed the law. But they decided to change the title, but it's very much the same. So that gave me the opportunity to write the Mont Guide. And we also have the transfer on death deed forms because my co-author was a law school professor as well as an attorney. So we could offer that for you. So let's just remember though, if we designate a beneficiary, I put rights in quotes because they cannot take your property until the owner dies. They can't sell it out from under you. They can't use it as a collateral for a loan. It's not theirs until you pass away. Okay, so all you're doing is deciding you want them to get it upon death, not before. Okay, now where do you do this? Where do you file a beneficiary deed? In the county where the property is located. And you file it with the clerk and recorder. Okay. Now let's say that you happen to be a land baron and you own property in Gallatin County and you also own property in Richland County. Hopefully in Richland County with a lot of oil under there. Anyway, you have to file 2 beneficiary deed or transfer on death deeds, one in Gallatin and one in Richland County. Now, who can be your designated beneficiaries? Well, just like any other way, you know, your spouse, your children, your friends, a corporation, an LLC, a partnership, anybody that you want, but also it could be your favorite nonprofit, whether it's the Billings Community Foundation or the Hill County Community Foundation. You can do that. Now, this happens to be a foxglove. And I actually saw some at Glacier National Park. So I want you to outfox the law, okay? What if you've named a beneficiary and that beneficiary happens to die before you do? Well, of course, you could file a new beneficiary deed, but you could be foxy. See my cute little foxes there? Yeah, Beartooth Mountains. I've got a new camera. I had one of those long lenses and I got those 2 and they're from the same grouping and don't they look different, but they were so cute. Moving along, we're going to look at Mark, and Mark has filed and recorded a transfer on death deed. And he said, I want, if something happens to me, I want it to go down to my son, Evan. But if Evan should die before I do, I want it to go down to Luke. So you see, Luke becomes a successor beneficiary, and that way Mark doesn't have to file later. I mean, while he's still alive, but of course, if he's deceased, and maybe Evan and he died in the same car accident, we don't know. Yes, you can have more than one. Okay, so we've got Luke and Lily could split that piece of property. Or you can select a nonprofit as a successor. Oh, Maggie, oh, did you put that in there? I wouldn't be so blatant as to hint, absolutely not. Now, Maggie, we'll talk after this. So outfox the law by naming a nonprofit as a successor or any of your relatives that you want to have. Now, this is a blue flax. And I know some of you think of that as a weed, but it's really a pretty flower, but it's also this tall. And I kid you not, even when you think the wind is not blowing, it is. Those little dudes just shudder like crazy. So I was glad to get this one. So I'm going to introduce you to Gary Blue and his two blue children, Linda Blue, and we got Matt Blue. And what has Gary done? He's named his daughter, Linda Blue, as his designated beneficiary. So we've got Linda there. She's a happy camper because she knows she's been designated. Well, then what does Gary do? He wrote a will, and now he's leaving that same property to his son. Okay, who gets the property when Gary Blue passes away? So Kristen's going to bring up the poll or the question. Who gets the property when Gary Blue passes away? Linda Blue or Matt Blue? And if everybody doesn't get this one right, I am going to commit Harry Carey. Okay, yay, yay. You all got it right, yay. Nobody got in at the last minute. 100% said Linda, and you are right. You are correct. She gets it all. And what is Matt? He gets 0. And he's telling, you want to talk about bad feelings in a family. He's saying, you know, Dad wanted me to have that. He wrote it in the will. Linda says, well, I'm the designated beneficiary. So what we've got is Matt singing the blues because he didn't inherit. Okay. Now it could have been Gary would have decided that he wants to leave it to the Alzheimer's Association, the Montana chapter. And I'll throw in something here. If you want something to go to the local place, like the Alzheimer's Association, you don't write just the Alzheimer's Association. We've got not a wonderful, but a case in Butte. And a gentleman died and he left his money to one of the men's groups that we typically think of. And everybody knows he wanted it to go to the Butte chapter. But no, the big organization is coming in and says, oh, those millions of dollars are ours. Eesh. So Montana chapter, that's where I want it to go. But in doing so, Matt and Linda are now singing the blues because Gary didn't leave it to either one of them. So you can't undo a transfer on death deed with a will. And again, you could say this out loud. It doesn't matter if the will was written before or after, right? Right. Good, good. Now this happens to be a Richardson geranium. And it's one that I took after a rain. And I just thought it was so neat. And anytime I can get those little fuzzy things in there in focus, I'm thrilled, absolutely. So I want to introduce to you Granny Richardson. Oh, she is just a doll, isn't she? I just love that photo. And she's going to tell us about a new law. This went into effect October 1st. And you can make a beneficiary designation for a vehicle or a vessel. And I'm calling this the BDVV. It's beneficiary designation. It's easier to remember if you just think MV13. It's now on their website. And by the way, what's a vessel? I kind of wondered about that. And it's motorboats, personal watercraft, motorized pontoons, and sailboats 12 feet in length and longer. You can have a beneficiary designation. Now, this is what Granny has. Yeah, I know she doesn't look the type, but she's got this $1.4 million car. And she's kind of envied by some of her relatives because it's that fancy Ferrari thing. And what Granny is wanting to do is file an MV-13 with the motor vehicle division. And she wants to leave the money, the car then, to the Montana Community Foundation. The Community Foundation can sell it, of course, and voila, what a deal. So they could be a helpful tool for helping your favorite nonprofit. Now, I wanted to show you here a little bit of the life of an extension specialist, because this is what I do in a normal situation. This is where I was March 13th up there in Sydney, and I was supposed to be in Missoula on March 14th. So I tried to do a car showing you the way, but that didn't work out too well. But that's what happened, and I did make it to Missoula. It was a forestry thing, and unfortunately, you know, that was when the shutdown was starting to occur, and he had about half the normal, the size that he usually had. But all those programs were canceled. So what I've done, you heard Maggie talk about Tuesday tips. We did those. We did Wisdom Wednesdays with AARP. And let me tell you, don't tell that I said this, but AARP is a great partner. They know how to get people out for a program. Then we did Thoughtful Thursdays with the Alumni Association. So that worked out well. And then this year I'm in the midst of Fabulous Fridays. And that is being sponsored by our Montana Center for Youth Development and the Montana 4-H Foundation. So I'm telling you, it always works better when you collaborate with your locals. Up in Hill County, it was Extension and the Community Foundation. In Helena, it was the Community Foundation and some other groups that, attorneys, some group with that. So you can get people interested in estate planning and get them out. And I know some of them will show up and say, I'm here. I don't intend to leave any money, but I just want to learn. And I laugh when people tell me that. We have special guests with our Fabulous Fridays, and I've tried to involve some of our 4-H youth that are involved and tell us a little bit about what 4-H is all about. And that's been fun for me, and it's also been fun for the kids. The other thing that we're doing is a 5-lesson learn at home. I had people contact me saying, Marsha, we don't have a computer. We don't have internet service. And you guys just forget about us. And I even had this marvelous thing. I'm gonna put a frame on it because she said, thank you for remembering the forgotten generation. And look who the co-sponsor on that is, or my collaborator is the Montana Community Foundation. So we don't have thousands of people enrolled in this course. We have 107, and that's keeping me hopping, but I'm delighted. And it's really gone so well that I want to have part 2 starting in February, and we will get into some additional kinds of topics. So estate planning is an area I love. It's an area that can benefit so many people. And because they did planning, it can benefit the next generation of nonprofits, charities, etc. So my observation from my lady slipper here that I took in Missoula, it's about time to wrap it up. So reminder tomorrow. Oh yeah, I know what I'm supposed to do. Wasn't that cool? Okay, here's the deal. Throughout the webinar, there's been a poster behind me. And I want to know, what is the wording at the top of the board? You see, we're supposed to be using all these things, branding, etc. And my question is, do people notice? But I am going to entice you to use that memory. Oh, I know what some people are going to do. They would listen to the recording. No, you have to put the answer in the chat room now. Okay? Have to put the answer in, because what you could win is a set of 5 free wildflower note cards of pictures that I've taken, and I just arbitrarily pick out 5 for you. So I hope somebody noticed. And if there's a tie with more than 2 people, I'll draw out of the hat. But otherwise, I'd give 2 people the cards. Okay, so I hope I steered you towards the potential consequences of using that joint tenancy as your only estate plan. I hope I steered you to the reasons why dying without a will is simply not the way to go. And I hope I steered you to avoid the cost of probate and leave your bequest to your local community foundations, because you can also use PODs, TODs, and TODs and BDVs. That's the new vessel one and vehicle. Now, some of you, I'm sure, well, no, I shouldn't say that. But sometimes I really don't have a memory like this elephant's head does. And yes, can't you see that's enough? Look at the ears, look at the nose. Oh, cute flower. You can find those where you find water in Yellowstone, typically in July. We have 48 mock guides. What are mock guides? Fact sheets. And we have fact sheets on 48, yep, count them, 48 different topics, okay? And they are also available at our website and our local MSU County Extension offices. So they're there in Missoula, okay? We've got some in Helena. We've got people out there that will fulfill your needs on lots of areas: agriculture, nutrition, community development. We're taking the university to the people. Okay, what kind of questions do we have in the chat room? And I have my note. Marsha, stop sharing. Okay, I will stop sharing, maybe.
Well, we did have a question and a comment, and hopefully if other people have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. Luke said about the wording behind you, wish I had noticed. I also wish I had. I was too taken by your presentation, which is maybe a good thing. But we did have a question from Nancy that said, would this website, in reference to the online Dying Without a Will guide, would it work in a state other than Montana?
No, it's specific to state law in Montana. And we just, that's why we wanted to do it specific to our state. So many things about estate planning are so general that, well, they're not very useful. So I've always made an attempt to make what I do specific to Montana, and to assure that I'm giving you the right information in those mock guides. It's reviewed by the business, estates, tax, trust, and real property section of the state bar. So a big relief, because I'm not an attorney, but they have taught me a lot over the years, and I've had great reviewers. So get those mock guides and see if they'd help you. But you know, you don't need all 48 at once either. Read them a little bit at a time. That will get your mind going. And our Fabulous Fridays and those Wisdom Wednesdays, all of those have been recorded. So if you just do Marsha Goetting AARP, you'll either get the recordings, or I'm also doing a teletown hall with them in November, December, and January. And if you can imagine me trying to talk over the telephone and explain Dying Without a Will, and I'm waving my hands, oh my, it's really tough when I don't have my show and tell things. But they seem to think it works. We had 1,000 people stay on the line last time. I would have hung up, geez, but they stayed. So what can you do? You just keep trying, keep at it. Other questions?
Open up the floor. If anybody wants to come off mute and ask Marsha a question. If not, I have a question. You know, in your own professional just opinion, what would be your first steps for creating a will if you don't have one?
Well, I'd go back even further, Maggie. We've got a mock guide that's called Estate Planning Getting Started. And in that one, we talk a lot about setting estate planning goals. You know, and if I said I was going to have a program on estate planning goals, people go, oh, brother, they won't even come. And back in the days when I let people vote on topics, they would never select that one. So once you know what it is you want to accomplish, and you've had those conversations with your spouse, and then I also have a list of what my attorney should know. I mean, an attorney shouldn't take your word for how you had the property title, because most people don't know the difference between a joint tenancy and a tenancy in common. So get all that together. And then we have a mock guide too on selecting an attorney. Because of COVID, I guess, I finally got that mock guide done. I wasn't traveling so much. I was staying at home, and I got that done. And it tells the things that I like to tell people about selecting an attorney, whether that attorney is going to handle probate or writing your will. And, you know, quite frankly, you got to like the attorney in the sense you're going to be more honest with the attorney. But I encourage shopping around, because you want to get somebody that's going to do the best job for you. And it used to be in the old days, if the first question they ask is how much of an estate do you have, I'd get mad because it was taxes, 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 taxes. Right now, I really thought when they changed the law, I wouldn't have to be out doing programs anymore. And you know, those roads do get slick after a while. But no, I have had more before COVID requests than I could handle. And 99% of us are not in a federal estate bracket. 100% of us don't pay inheritance tax because Montana has no inheritance tax. The main thing I want to get across to people right now is basis, stepped up basis and carryover basis. And I've got a mock guide done on that, and I hope it'll be out in a couple of months. We have shortages on our campus of people that do that kind of work. So it's there, plus 2 others. And when those are done, I'll be really excited. I know that wasn't the question you asked, but I tend to go on and on. So sorry.
No, I think that's perfect. And for any participants, we will work on getting the mock guides on our LCF page. So when you go and you can look at recordings and resources, so we'll make it easy for you guys to find those. We have another question from Jess that says, do I have to use an attorney to create my will, or could I just do it myself?
You could answer that one too. Actually, Montana is one of the few states that does allow a holographic will. And a holographic will is one that is written totally in your handwriting. Okay. If you have a formal will, what your attorney is going to do is have, and that's typed or computer, going to have 2 witnesses. And the 2 witnesses are going to sign that they saw you signing the will and that you were of sound mind. And that's a good thing to do if you got enough out there that people are going to be fighting like crazy over it. And the thing about writing your own will is you don't necessarily know the right terminology. Remember the one that we had, it was in Western Montana, and a guy wrote his will on motel stationery. And it was handwritten, ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. And you know what? The judge rejected it. And why did the judge reject it? Not everything was in the testator's handwriting. What was on that stationery was a photo, a drawing of the cabins, the name of the motel, phone number, etc. So you don't know what a judge is going to do with your handwritten will if somebody comes in and says, oh, that isn't even John's handwriting. Oh, brother. So then we got to prove that it's really John's handwriting. So yes, you can do your will. Do I think it's a good idea? Probably not. I bet your situation is enough to warrant paying for a will. And the attorneys aren't going to break you over doing a will. I mean, some of them will even offer it, not necessarily a discount, but they want you to know that they're real people. And you may come back to them for other things if they have a good experience writing that will. And have I written my own? You know, I think I'm pretty hot stuff and I think I know my stuff. I had my will done. I didn't like paying the price. I had to breathe deeply, but it was complicated because I was wanting to protect my folks. If something happened to me at that time, I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. So I was looking at trusts, I was doing, you know, so it's a little more expensive there.
That's awesome. We have another question from Luke that says, is adding a beneficiary to an online retirement account the same thing as a POD or a TOD?
Yeah, it's a designated beneficiary. And it's just Montana in our laws have decided to call it a payable on death designation. Okay, transfer on death registration. But on your retirement account, you indicate who you want to be the beneficiary. And don't forget about that spouse. You can't just name somebody else automatically. That spouse has to sign off on it. Just saying, so you know. Okay.
Awesome. Are there any more questions from the group for Dr. Goetting?
Oh, call me Marsha.
You worked hard for that title. You deserve it.
I know, but oh goodness. I don't know who that person is half the time. Well, may I say thank you very much for those of you that attended this evening. It's been a delight to, I could actually see some of you smiling there at some of my things. And that's what keeps me going, is every now and then, if I can say something that make an estate planning meeting not boring. So thank you very much, Maggie and Teal and Kristen, for having me. And I look forward to any of you community foundations. You know, we could still do a webinar type thing if you think people would participate. We'd be glad. Anybody wants to be a guinea pig, give me a holler. We'll see what we can do.
Well, thank you so much, Marsha, for your presentation. It was incredibly insightful for me. And we'll make sure that your information is put online with the other resources so that if people have follow-up questions, they can reach out to you. We have a few people typing in the chat, just great job, love your presentations. The feedback's always amazing. So with that, this is the end of our 2021 LCF convening. I hope that there was something that you could take away from one of the 3 sessions, or maybe something from all 3. Like I said, resources will be shared and you can watch them at any point in time. So I hope that everyone has a lovely remainder of their Thursday evening, and yeah, take it easy. Enjoy Halloween weekend.
And it's dessert time.
Yes, it is. Apparently it's National Chocolate Day, so be sure to treat yourself.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you everyone so much.